Welcome back to Midnight Tales, where we peel back the veil between worlds. Tonight, we don't just tell a story. We will relive a waking nightmare in a place that was hell on earth, where death was not a release, but merely the overture to an endless, mournful symphony. I am Arthur, and my team and I have just returned from an expedition that I fear will haunt us for the rest of our lives. We went to the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the home of deaths, where their echoes still whisper in the dark. October in Kentucky had turned chillingly cold. The bone-biting wind carried the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth, creating the perfect funereal atmosphere for our journey. I am Arthur, founder and host of the Midnight Tales YouTube channel. Accompanying me were two indispensable members of my team. Ethan, our tech expert, a staunch rationalist who believed every phenomenon could be explained by his machines. And Eleanor, our sensitive, whose sixth sense was terrifyingly acute, often too acute, leaving her plagued by nameless nightmares, a heavy price for her unique gift. Our target this time was the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. This name reverberates through paranormal communities like a cursed incantation. Nestled on a hill in Louisville, Waverly Hills was initially built as a state-of-the-art tuberculosis hospital, a beacon of hope for those afflicted with the White Plague. But from its opening in until its final closure in, it became a colossal human grinder. Official death tolls were suppressed, but it is estimated that people took their last breath here, trapped between disease, despair, and barbaric treatments. As our van passed through the rusted iron gates, we were confronted by a colossal, time-ravaged Gothic structure. Under the faint crescent moon, Waverly Hills loomed like a monstrous stone beast, its hundreds of blackened windows like hollow eye sockets staring into the night. The air was thick with a palpable heaviness, an invisible pressure squeezing our chests. The smell of dampness, dust, and something indescribable, like old antiseptic mixed with dried blood and decay, wafted into our nostrils. A scent that immediately set our nerves on edge and signaled the horrors within its walls. Eleanor, sitting in the back, timidly clutched my sleeve, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Arthur, I feel cold, a bone-chilling cold." I knew Eleanor wasn't exaggerating. She was our barometer for the paranormal. I tried to reassure her with a smile, but my own spine tingled with unease. I've been to many haunted places, but Waverly Hills was different. It wasn't just haunted, it breathed. Every brick, every wall seemed to whisper its own tragic tale, a collective history of immense suffering that permeated the very atmosphere around the decaying structure. We stepped out of the van, the crunch of gravel under our boots the only sound in the oppressive silence. Ethan's high-powered flashlight cut a sharp beam across the sanatorium's facade, revealing peeling walls and ivy clinging like dried veins. "The main gate is locked," Ethan announced matter-of-factly, "but my research shows there's a side entrance on the west, a broken ground floor window." His practical approach was a small comfort in the face of the overwhelming dread that was already beginning to seep into our minds as we prepared to enter the infamous building. As we circled the building, the skeletal branches of ancient trees cast warped shadows on the moss-covered walls, forming grotesque shapes like bony hands reaching from the earth to hold us back. With every step, I felt hundreds of unseen eyes following our every move. The wind whistled through broken panes of glass, sounding uncannily like the mournful cries of thousands of trapped souls. A constant, sorrowful lament that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the sanatorium. A chorus of despair that had echoed here for decades, never fading with time. We finally found the designated window. Ethan went in first, followed by Eleanor, and then me. The moment my feet touched the floor inside, a blast of frigid air cut through my thick jacket, seeping deep into my bones. I felt as if I had stepped into another world, one forgotten by time and cursed by death. "Welcome to Waverly Hills," I whispered into my lapel mic, my voice hoarse and barely audible, where the echoes of deaths still resonate. The true investigation and our nightmare had just begun. We found ourselves in a long, pitch-black corridor. Large patches of paint had peeled from the walls, revealing the rough brickwork beneath. Our flashlight beams swept across scattered, rotting bed linens, rusty gurneys lying askew, and rows of empty, cold hospital beds that stood like unmarked graves. Each one of those beds had witnessed a soul struggling in agony before finally succumbing. A silent monument to the immense human suffering that had unfolded within these walls, turning the space into a vast, forgotten cemetery of pain and loss that refused to be silent. Ethan began setting up his mobile command center, a familiar ritual that brought a sense of normalcy to the madness. He mounted an infrared camera on a tripod, switched on his EMF meter, night vision camcorder, and strategically placed motion sensors. "EMF is stable, but there's a slight, erratic fluctuation," he murmured, his eyes glued to the screen. "Ambient temperature is degrees Celsius." His focus on data was his shield against the overwhelming sense of dread that saturated the air. A rational mind trying to quantify the irrational. Eleanor stood close to me, hugging herself, her eyes darting nervously around the sprawling corridor. "I feel them everywhere, Arthur." a massive, chaotic crowd, cries, coughs, and a strange smell, the smell of fear and despair. I felt the oppressive weight in the air too. Every rustle, every gust of wind made me jump. The fear at Waverly Hills wasn't from jump scares or loud noises. It came from the sheer presence, from an invisible pressure weighing down on every sense. A constant and suffocating reminder of the tragedy that had occurred here. We ventured deeper into the sanatorium's decaying heart. The corridor seemed endless, a dark moss stretching into the unknown. Crude graffiti left by previous explorers added to the eerie atmosphere, but it couldn't hide the authentic traces of the past. Dark, ambiguous stains on the floor that I dared not identify. Scattered old medical charts with faded ink, and strange scratch marks on the walls, far higher than a person could normally reach, suggesting a desperate and frantic struggle that sent chills down my spine. The building's history was etched into its very structure. As we reached the main hall, where a grand stone staircase led to the upper floors, the first major event occurred. The temperature around us plummeted dramatically. The mist of our breath became thick and visible in our flashlight beams. A sudden and unnatural change. Sudden temperature drop, Ethan announced, his voice tight with a mix of excitement and fear as he watched his digital thermometer from degrees down to in less than 10 seconds. This was a classic sign of a paranormal presence making itself known. Simultaneously, his EMF meter began to shriek violently. A series of piercing, rapid beeps that shattered the silence and set our hearts racing. Spike, a massive spike, and it's moving, Ethan exclaimed, pointing at the flashing screen of his device. At that exact moment, Eleanor recoiled, her eyes wide with terror, staring up the darkened staircase. I see it, a shadow, at the top of the landing. Her voice was a strained whisper, filled with a primal fear that was instantly contagious, gripping us all in its icy hold. I quickly aimed my flashlight towards the spot she indicated. She was right. A tall, dark, shadowy figure stood silently at the end of the second-floor hallway. It didn't move. It was just a black stain against the pale, peeling wall, a void in the shape of a man. We held our breath, frozen in place. The shadow remained for a few seconds, a silent and imposing sentinel, then slowly faded into the darkness, as if dissolving into the very air itself. This was no trick of the light. This was a direct manifestation. What the hell was that? Ethan stammered, his usual composure completely gone. Despite his experience with paranormal technology and his skeptical nature, he had never witnessed anything so defined and unambiguous. A welcome party, I whispered back. my own voice betraying my unease. But I knew deep down this was just the beginning of our ordeal. Waverly Hills was starting to speak to us, and its voice was one of darkness and sorrow. We had its attention now, and there was no turning back from what we had started. We proceeded up the stairs, each footstep echoing ominously in the profound silence. The second floor felt even colder, the air more oppressive than below. I feel like someone is walking right behind me, Eleanor shivered, her words barely audible. I can hear breathing. It's heavy, like someone is suffocating. We stopped, the sound of our own hearts pounding in our ears. I turned on my EVP recorder, hoping to capture the unseen presence that Eleanor could so clearly feel following us up the grand, decaying staircase. Is there anyone here with us? Please give us a sign. We come in peace, I spoke into the device, my voice sounding small and insignificant in the vast, empty space. There was no immediate response, only a chilling, dead silence. We waited, the tension mounting with each passing second. Suddenly, from the speaker of the EVP device, a faint whisper emerged. It was distorted, like a long, drawn-out moan, mixed with a wet, racking cough. It was the unmistakable sound of a soul, still suffering from the very disease that had claimed their life. Eleanor suddenly pointed to a dilapidated patient room door. Number, it's in there. The energy is so strong. Her intuition was rarely wrong. We cautiously pushed open the jammed door. The sound of splintering wood echoing down the hall. Inside was a small, desolate room with a rusty iron bed and a broken nightstand. On the nightstand lay an empty medicine bottle and a faded old notebook. When I shone my light on the notebook, I saw hurried, scrawled pencil markings, a final testament to a life lost in despair. November TH. I can't take it anymore. The coughing, it never stops. The fevers, they're burning me from the inside. Death would be better than this. The desperate words on the page were a gut-wrenching glimpse into the past. Suddenly, the medicine bottle on the nightstand began to vibrate intensely. It then slid to the edge and fell to the floor, shattering into countless pieces. There was no draft. No one had touched it. It simply fell on its own accord. A clear act of poltergeist activity, leaving the terrifying room behind. We continued our ascent to the third floor. Eleanor was still shaken by the experience, but she was determined to press on, driven by a need to understand the spirits here. I feel so much energy here, Arthur, she said, her voice regaining some strength. A lot of suffering, but also an innocence somewhere else. As we reached the third floor, the atmosphere seemed to shift subtly. The heavy presence of death remained, but it was now mingled with a strange, chilling feeling that wasn't as menacing as the floor below. Ethan checked his old map of the hospital, confirming our location. "This was the children's ward," he said, pointing to a section on the diagram. This area was slightly brighter, with walls that had once been painted in pale pastels, now peeling and faded. On the floor, we found old, forgotten toys. A doll with no eyes, a wooden building block, a small truck with a missing wheel, and more horrifyingly, small metal cages, where children with tuberculosis were once placed outside on the rooftop, regardless of the weather, in a desperate hope that fresh air would cure them. As we passed a room, a small sound caught our attention. It was a clattering, as if something was being moved inside. I shone my flashlight into the room. An old, deflated rubber ball was slowly rolling across the floor before coming to a stop in the middle of the room. It couldn't have been the wind. The room was completely sealed. Eleanor approached the ball, her eyes filled with a profound sorrow. "A little boy. His name is Timmy. I see him playing all alone in this corner," she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. Eleanor gently placed her hand on the ball. "Timmy, are you here with us?" Ethan's EMF meter began to spike again, but this time the intensity was different. It was a series of gentle, fluctuating waves, as if responding to Eleanor's question. From our EVP recorder, we heard a faint, tiny, and clear giggle, which then faded away into the oppressive silence. It was the sound of a child, innocent, and yet heartbreakingly lonely, still trapped within these walls, forever seeking a playmate in the afterlife. Suddenly, the door to the patient room opposite us slammed shut with an earth-shattering bang that echoed through the entire floor. We jumped, our hearts pounding in our chests, our flashlights darting frantically. Ethan rushed to the door, but it was stuck fast. Something just slammed it shut. From inside the locked room, we heard the clatter of toys being thrown, the sound of marbles rolling across the floor, and then, once again, the faint giggle of a child. This time, however, the laughter was different, laced with a petulant sadness. The 5th floor of Waverly Hills is rumored to be the epicenter of its paranormal activity. Specifically, The Room is tied to 2 horrifying tragedies. A nurse who hanged herself therein, and another nurse, Mary Hill, who allegedly jumped from the window as we reached the 5th floor. The air became suffocatingly thick. Ethan's EMF meter screamed a continuous, high-pitched alarm. The temperature dropped sharply, and I felt as if thousands of invisible eyes were watching us from the suffocating shadows. "The presence here is overwhelming," Eleanor whispered, her trembling hand gripping my arm tightly. "I feel anger, despair, and betrayal. Room was at the end of the hall, its wooden door decayed and hanging by a single hinge. As we stepped inside, an indescribable scent hit us, the smell of withered lilies and rusted metal. The room was bare, save for a collapsed iron bed in the corner. I asked into the emptiness, "Mary, are you here?" Only a dead, oppressive silence answered, thick with the weight of unresolved tragedy. Suddenly, from a corner of the room, a small crack sound echoed, like the snapping of a bone. My EVP recorder crackled to life, and a faint, hoarse voice whispered the words, "Lonely. Forever." Eleanor gasped, letting out a small scream as her eyes widened, staring at a spot in the middle of the room. "I see it. A figure. A woman." I quickly aimed my flashlight and saw a tall, hazy figure in a faded white dress. Long, dark hair obscured her face, which I saw was just a hollow, black void. A blast of frigid air hit us, and the female figure began to glide across the floor, directly towards Eleanor. "No," Eleanor screamed, trying to retreat, but seemingly held in place by an invisible force. The figure's ethereal fingers passed through Eleanor's shoulder, and instantly, Eleanor began to convulse violently. I don't want to die," she screamed. But the voice was not her own. It was the hoarse, anguished voice of a woman. "He betrayed me, the baby. He killed my baby." Mary's agony had momentarily possessed her. In a panic, Ethan snapped a picture with his infrared camera. A brilliant flash illuminated the room, and in that instant, the female figure vanished. Eleanor collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. "Arthur, I saw it. I saw her jump," she sobbed. Mary Hill's agony had forced Eleanor to relive the final, horrifying moments of the tragic nurse's life. Ethan showed me the camera. On the screen, a hazy image of a woman with skeletal, outstretched hands was clearly visible, chilling proof of our encounter. After the horrifying experience in room, we descended towards the death tunnel, also known as the body chute. This foot-long underground tunnel ran from the hospital's basement to an exit near the railroad tracks, constructed to transport the bodies of the deceased out of sight from the living patients. As we entered the tunnel, a suffocating sensation washed over us. The rough, damp stone walls seemed to close in, pressing down on us as water dripped steadily from the ceiling. A macabre rhythm in the dark. "Arthur, I hear something," Eleanor whispered, her voice faltering. "Wheels." And dragging, she was right. From the depths of the darkness, we could hear the clattering of wheels, like an old gurney being dragged across the concrete. As we ventured deeper, the temperature continued to drop. Then, right before our eyes, hazy, translucent figures began to appear. Emaciated figures in patient gowns glided past us, their faces vacant, their eyes hollow. "They're the dead," Eleanor wept. "They're still walking their final journey." We stood there, frozen, watching the ghostly procession pass. They meant us no harm, but their collective suffering was overwhelming, pulling us into a vortex of despair. The sound of the gurney's wheels grew louder, closer, as if it were right behind us. Though nothing was there when we turned, we finally stumbled out of the tunnel, gasping the cold night air. The horror of witnessing thousands of souls forever replaying their final journey etched into our minds. The tunnel wasn't just physical. It was a spiritual conduit for endless sorrow. As we made our way back to the main hall to leave, a sense of danger far greater than anything we had yet experienced descended upon us. The air turned frigid with a cold of pure, malevolent rage. "It doesn't want us to leave," Eleanor whispered. Just then, every door in the main hall slammed shut simultaneously with a deafening bang. The window we had entered through was slammed shut by an unseen force, shattering the remaining glass. We were trapped inside with whatever haunted this cursed place. Our flashlights began to flicker wildly, and then died, plunging us into absolute living darkness. From the shadows, angry whispers began to rise from thousands of voices at once, a horrifying symphony of suffering and rage. I sparked my Zippo lighter, and in its flickering flame, I saw it, a massive shadow over 7 feet tall, stood in the center of the hall, a swirling mass of darkness with 2 glowing red embers for eyes. It was the embodiment of all the evil and suffering festering in this sanatorium. The shadow lunged straight for us with terrifying speed. "Move," I yelled, shoving Eleanor and Ethan out of the way as it shot past, clawing 5 deep gouges into the wall behind us. In desperation, Ethan and I shoved a rusty medical gurney into the dark mass. A terrifying, metallic shriek ripped through the air. As the shadow dispersed for a moment, we seized the opportunity, running blindly down a corridor until we found a fire escape door blocked by wooden planks. Our only chance at survival. Together, I shouted. The 3 of us threw our combined weight against the door. With a deafening crack, the hinges broke and the door crashed outwards, revealing the cold night sky. We scrambled out of Waverly Hills like hunted animals. The shadows, enraged growl echoing behind us, but seeming unable to cross the sanatorium's threshold. As we ran, I risked a final glance back. The colossal sanatorium stood there, a black silhouette against the night, its empty windows watching us with anger, fear, and despair. Back at the studio, reviewing the footage was a horrifying ordeal. We had undeniable evidence. The audio from room with the whisper lonely, forever, and Eleanor's possessed cry was confirmed to be authentic. The hazy image of the woman in the white dress was clearly captured on Ethan's infrared camera. Most terrifying was the audio from our escape. The growls, the screams, and the unearthly shriek of the shadow when we hid it. It was all chillingly, undeniably real. But there was one recording we could never forget. It was captured as we fled through the woods. Ethan's device, still capturing ambient sound, had picked up something beneath the whistling wind. It was a faint audio track, like a chorus of thousands of voices, all whispering a single word over and over again. Stay, stay, stay. The echo of deaths, a collective plea from the abandoned souls, forever trapped in the dark corridors, in the cold rooms, and in the vortex of an eternal fury. Our story on the Midnight Tales channel went viral. But for us, Waverly Hills is not just a story. It is a scar etched deep into our souls. Eleanor still suffers from nightmares. Ethan, once a staunch rationalist, now wears a small cross. And as for me, every quiet night, I can still hear that whisper. And I know that a part of me was left behind at Waverly Hills, forever bound to the souls who could never find peace, forever part of its terrifying, echoing symphony.